All right, everyone, and welcome to a Q&A session on France. I'm joined today by Anne Della Victoria, who is our partner in France.
Hello.
I'm really excited. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to talk about France specifically because there's not really much I have to sell people on. It's one of the most popular tourist destinations. As we were just talking, the Olympics are coming there. Very well known, and it's a beautiful country. I was just there this summer, so excited to dive into the options for France and kind of staying longer than the 3 months tourist visa, which is what everyone wants to do. Is once they see France, they want to stay longer. So excited to kind of have you assist us in breaking that down. Now, I know France doesn't necessarily have a digital nomad visa per se, but they do have pathways to stay longer than those 3 months. And I'm hoping, Anne, that you might be able to help us kind of clarify that and start us off by explaining maybe some visa types that are popular options to stay longer than those 3 months.
Sure. So I think it depends on what you plan on doing in France. So if you are a digital nomad, you plan on staying just for 1 year and don't see yourself living here indefinitely, I would say the long stay visitor visa is actually an okay option for you as long as you're not working for a company in France. If you're working remotely, for example, for your own company and don't plan on staying here for more than a year or 2 years maximum, if you have a company in the U.S. or in Australia or wherever you have your job, even if it's a permanent job and you're able to work remotely, long stay visitor visa is okay. The thing is, you're not technically allowed to be working here on that visa, but because you're not staying indefinitely, then it's fine. I mean, we work with immigration consultants all the time as well, so we all kind of discuss this amongst ourselves, and we've all collectively agreed that it's a fine.
Great.
And then the other option is if you do plan on staying in France indefinitely, then and you are, have your own business or you're working as a contractor or freelancer for other companies all over the world, then I would say the entrepreneur profession liberal visa is probably the choice that you would want to make. The process for this application is definitely more tedious than a regular type of visa. For example, you would have to, create a business plan based on what you're doing, be a bit specialized in what you think you're going to be doing in France, and then obviously get testimonials, do your CV. There's an extra process called the DREETS application, which you have to kind of demand this type of work in France, but although it's not mandatory, it's quite good for your application and makes it stronger. So those are, I would say, the two best options for digital nomads, even though there's no digital nomad visa in France. Those are the two options that you essentially have.
Okay. And so I know that you mentioned that even if you have full-time employment and you don't have your own company, that long stay 12-month visa you might be eligible for, that isn't going to be the case with the entrepreneurial visa. Is that correct? Or is that?
Yeah, so for the entrepreneurial visa, you're technically your own company, right? You're a freelancer, your own company. They want to see that you have more than one client. So basically, if you're working for one company, they're going to be like, you should be on a talent visa, which is not the case. And it's more difficult to be on a talent visa in France. So if you were to, apply for the entrepreneur professional liberal visa, you can stay with your one client, but highly suggest you do other freelance jobs, even if it's very small projects on the side, just so that you're invoicing multiple people to be able to renew your visa. Within this visa, they give you 1 year, and it's actually quite easy to get to prove that you can make at least 1,500 euro net per month to be able to support yourself. And of course, the first couple of months you're just setting yourself up, the creation of your business here in France. So they know that you won't be invoicing at that time and making that amount of money. But as long as you can prove that at least by the 6 to 3 month end of your first year of the visa, they will be able to renew it. And usually it's around 4 years to 5 years. Once you reach, 5 years of staying in France, then you can apply for French nationality, and hopefully your French will be much better by then if you have zero knowledge of the French language. But yeah, so I would say, although it's tedious and definitely more work because you are your own business, I would say it's more rewarding.
Yeah, because you get to stay in France longer than 12
Exactly.
months. Well, fantastic. And then I guess just on that, it sounds like there are some pathways to residency depending on your situation. Are there any, is this open to all nationalities? Are there any people that are more likely to, get acceptance, or how does that kind of work out?
I mean, there's a lot of political unrest right now going on in the world. So
Hmm.
unfortunately, obviously, as lawyers and stuff like that, we can never guarantee a visa for anyone. But I would say it's quite easy for, the US, UK, Australians, New Zealand, people from New Zealand, even if you're coming from like Africa, depending on which, country in Africa, or yeah, from which country in Africa. I would say the Middle East is probably going to be a bit harder to get an acceptance on, but yeah, for the most part, they usually accept everyone. And what's nice about this is that most consulates don't really know about this visa in general. So the fact that you're applying, most chances that you'll be accepted to it just because not many people are applying for it in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then kind of on top of that, a lot of questions we get is that timeline of that application. As some consulates don't really know about it, I don't know if that lengthens that time. Like, how much would you say somebody should prepare in the timeline that they should prepare when applying for this kind of visa?
Like the clients that I've worked with, it really depends on their own motivations and, the motivations of the person who wants to come to France. Sometimes people take 6 months to prepare, just, collect all their documents, because people can get, be in doubt about if they actually want to do this
Hmm.
or, if they're ready to like jump the gun and create their own business. They get a little bit scared about that. So it could, it really depends on the person. It could be 6 months, but I guess in general, the process would take around like 2 months maximum.
Okay. That's good to
Yeah.
know. And then another common question we always get is, are there income requirements? I know you mentioned that 1,500 a month. Are there any savings that you should kind of prepare? And then, on top of that, I know you guys also assist with accommodation and stuff. Like, what are some general expenses that you should kind of prepare for to spend when considering this relocation?
I would say, let's say for the long stay visitor visa, obviously, as you're not going to be your own company and everything like that, I would try to save at least 2,000, 2,500 per month
Okay.
to be able to support yourself. Because well, it depends on where you live in Paris. I mean, in France, sorry. In Paris is really expensive.
Yeah.
So kind of take into consideration that the housing pricing is really high here. Obviously, it's not as high as like New York, for example, but it's still considered quite high compared to a lot of cities in the world. And then in terms of how you live, food and, business related things that you need to do, I would say at least 2,500 that you can prove to the consulate that you're able to support yourself while living here in France. For the entrepreneur professional liberal visa, I would say it's about the same, but also you have to prove it's 1,500 euro net per month that you're making into your bank account, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. And, like while there are those minimums, it's kind of better to have a little bit more than that, because, some of these visas tend to be competitive. And so when you have
Right.
two visas, typically they'll side with the one that is a little bit more attractive for the country.
Sure.
So just something that I've kind of learned over the time in relocating. I guess another thing is, are dependents, allowed to come on these visas? A lot of families want to relocate, whether it be 12 months, a year abroad with their kids. It's kind of becoming a more attractive option. Is that something that's allowed on these visas?
Oh yeah, definitely. So the long stay visitor visa, of course, if you're an adult, you apply for the long stay visitor visa as an adult, and then for your children, it's just the minor application. Very easy. It would be the same process, basically. They need a passport, a valid passport as well. And then for the entrepreneur professional liberal visa, you apply as an entrepreneur professional liberal, but you apply your children as a long stay visitor visa as a
Okay.
minor.
And
So
that's
also quite
extendable
easy.
as well.
Yeah, it's also extendable.
Okay, cool. And then I know that we kind of talked about this, and you're not a tax expert, so I'll just get that out of the way now, so you don't have to say it. A very common question are taxes. Everyone wants to know what their situation looks like. Are there any incentives on these visas? And if not, or if so, can you expand on it? What does that kind of tax situation look like in France, just generally?
Okay, so we'll start with the long stay visitor visa. The long stay visitor visa, well, you're technically not allowed to work here, so there's no taxes.
Okay.
What's actually nice though is that even though if you're in a long stay visitor visa, you can technically apply for the health care after 3 months of living in France. So, and you will get a social security number. So
Wow.
in a way, you're kind of tapping into the healthcare system in France and kind of getting yourself situated, even if you don't plan on staying indefinitely. But that's nice, there's a lot of incentives for foreigners in France, actually, even if you're not paying, social charges. For the entrepreneur professional liberal visa, there is an incentive in terms of taxes for the first year. So there's this subvention called ACRE, ACRE, where if you apply for it, and I can't say you would, automatically get accepted, but the government actually helps you in terms of finances for the first year to be able to set up your business. And you'll have a mentor, you can go to some certain classes and stuff like that to help you build your business in France or as a freelancer. Not everyone is accepted, but if you do get accepted, it's really great. In terms of taxes, usually it's around like 0 to 1%, just so you can get yourself situated as well. So really, it's like very minimal amount of taxes that you have to pay for the first year, and then on the second year, you start paying around like 24% of your revenue.
Okay. Well, I didn't know about this 0 to 1%. That's kind of attractive.
I know.
Good to know.
Now we're going to get a lot of applicants being like, all right.
Exactly. All right. And so again, the idea of this is just a general brief Q&A. So I only have one last question to follow up,
Sure.
which is stay requirements. A lot of people, obviously very excited to come to France and live in France, but then the EU is a very beautiful place. They want to travel around. Can you kind of outline what that process looks like, and especially for people who want to reapply, what the minimum stay is and all of that?
So basically, if you want to, well, let's say long stay visitor visa, you can travel anywhere in France because you won't be staying for a while. So it's multiple entries, so you can come and go as you please, in fact. As for the entrepreneur professional liberal visa, my recommendation would be to stay at least in total of 6 months in France to be able to renew it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you get your renewal, you can go live in Denmark or something like that. But you would have to apply for a visa over there, for example.
Yeah, they're different countries. So.
But you can still return to France at any time that you want. It's just I would recommend, and as immigration controllers at the airport or something like that, they'll see that you've been gone for a certain amount of time. So they're going to be like, what's the point of having this person here if they're just consistently gone? Mm-hmm. So just keep that in mind, I would say.
Okay. Wonderful. And this has been incredibly informative. Obviously, if anyone wants to inquire further about their pathway to stay longer in France, you can reach out to us at Citizen Remote. Get on the app, and then you'll find you on France, and you can just talk directly with you, book a consultation. Is there anything beyond what we've talked about that you might want to let people know about, or do we kind of cover it all?
There's a lot of aspects to France and relocation.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I would say if you do plan on coming to France, in terms of finding housing, that's really one of the painful aspects of relocation. Make sure you prepare a good application for your housing. It's called a dossier in French. And plan on maybe getting at least 1 to 2 months of a temporary place while you find your housing, because it does take that long.
Absolutely.
Sometimes.
And then, that kind of made me think of one thing. In Spain, I had a problem where, I do my entrepreneurial stuff and I don't actually have a job in Spain. And for me, like I actually had one scenario where I said I will pay, it was a 6-month contract. I said I will pay the security deposit and all of it up front. And they still said no because I didn't have a Spanish income and a job. Is that similar to France, or, what can people anticipate in that regard?
Yeah. So usually if you have a permanent contract in France, they prefer this dossier, this application more so than a foreigner. Luckily, for example, we have a partnership with this company called Guarantee, which actually helps as a insurer in case, anything happens with lack of paying of rent or anything like that. Foreigners usually use this to get a certificate and kind of help the landlord kind of feel safe regarding their choice of, giving the apartment to a foreigner. It's not just Guarantee though, but there's also other options. It's just, it takes a while, I would say, to find housing, especially if you're a freelancer or self-employed, plus you're a foreigner. It's even a bit harder.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's the same everywhere in Europe, but
well, I wanted to bring it up because you just made a really
it's
good
important.
point.
Honestly, it's important for them to know that.
Absolutely. And so what I'm gathering is, if you're wanting to relocate to France, to use someone such as yourself in Citizen Remote, because there is so many complex issues that you don't even anticipate. So, I mean, it's really beneficial to just have someone assist you in country, which obviously,
just consult you on the best way to go about doing things. You don't actually need our help physically, but maybe just at least someone to talk to, and that's where Citizen Remote comes in,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anne, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy, so I appreciate you helping everyone.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you too, Tim.
Thank you.